Good morning, Sean Hogue.
Good morning.
Welcome to Caffeinated Q&A again. We're here on this beautiful sunny Tuesday morning in Erie, Pennsylvania. So, Sean, how was your weekend?
My weekend was fantastic. I should probably have gotten permission from you to share this story before we talked about it,
Oh, no.
but it's fine. No, so I picked up, I think, a new summer hobby. Some friends and I went and played frisbee golf. So it was my first time ever. We apparently really love chasing frisbees because we certainly didn't do well, but yeah, it was a lot of fun. I also got to make a trip to Cleveland, which was kind of cool.
Cool. I've never played frisbee golf, but I imagine if I did, I would also be chasing a frisbee, much like I chase a golf ball when I play row golf. So,
Yeah.
Do frisbees get lost in the weeds as easily as golf balls? Yes, interesting. Okay, I'm not going to sign up for this
And
yet.
frisbees are much more expensive, so
So you look for them longer.
yes.
So just like people look for golf balls on the golf course and sell them back to golfers, can I go and like look for frisbees in the woods and sell them back to?
I don't know if you can see this.
Nice.
That is a product of. It's actually not too bad today. That is a product of looking for a frisbee down a cliff.
Good times.
Yeah,
good times.
It's fine.
Cool. Well, it's good to get out and enjoy the weather. So let's talk about caffeinated Q&A. So again, guys, thank you for joining us. Welcome. I hope everyone's doing well. I hope everyone's staying safe, staying sane, and I hope that you guys are enjoying the emails that are coming out on Monday morning. So if you want to get the emails, again, we put resources in there. You can go to ghostcreative.com/live, sign up for the emails. We'll send you one a week and hopefully provide you with some valuable resources that we don't share other places. So I hope you're doing that. If you haven't done it, please go do it. And let's talk about caffeine. So listen, I have got to raise the bar because I'm drinking Death Wish coffee again. And it's fantastic, but I have to, this is too boring. I have to get something else. So I apologize to you guys. This is just Death Wish coffee again. I will have something different on Friday.
So you always tell me that I'm boring with my tea choice. I like to think I'm consistent, but it's fine. However, this time I'm not as boring because I got to go to Trader Joe's in Cleveland. So we got ourselves some organic, because I'm bougie. It's also like what they had. Moroccan mint green tea. And I'm sure that's just some clever marketing to be like, we just threw some tea leaves in a bag and made it green tea.
But we can appreciate good marketing. We can appreciate good marketing, right?
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. So guys, today we're going to talk a little bit about brand. So we use the word brand a lot, but the question is really like, if I asked you guys, or even if you asked us what the definition of brand is, it's very, very difficult to define because it's very complex. I joke around and say that love and brand are the two most complicated one-syllable words in the English language, right? Like it's just something that you hear where people talk about brand, go create your brand. What is your brand? And the word gets thrown around as if it's something where you just go do it. You just go create your brand. And it's really, really difficult. And Sean and I talk a lot about this. We talk a lot about brand, even internally, we talk about our brand. And I'll just be completely transparent and say, even with our own brand, and Sean can back this up, we have a hard time defining our own brand because it's just complicated. And anybody that tells you otherwise, I think they've not actually dug into what brand means. So Sean, just quickly, what are your thoughts on, or just, can you elaborate a little bit on what I said? And I'm kind of, putting you on the spot here, but what have you seen? Because, I've been working on the business for a while. You've been here for, a little less than a year. What have you seen with our struggles with brand? I think it's important to know that like, this is something you have to put time and effort into, and it's not something you just define overnight. So what is your perspective of the struggles that you've seen with Ghost creating our own brand?
I mean, I think there's several things one, people and really very much ourselves are included in this. People don't spend enough time talking about it. For one, I think that there is a very, very clear distinction between companies that clearly invest and protect brand. So you're looking at things like Nike and Apple, and I mean, we use those as examples all the time. But the reason they are the business that they are is because they've focused on and they've built a brand. So people definitely don't spend enough time talking about it. I think the other thing is people are kind of scared of it because you're taking very kind of intangible ideas and very, very like identity driven conversations. And a lot of times people are like, well, I don't like when you yourself are wrapped up in the identity of your business, it can get pretty vulnerable. And sometimes that can be kind of scary. And so just the interactions that I've had with different businesses that we've worked with is they tend to steer away from those conversations because they have to get very honest about why their business exists. And that's not always pleasant. So it's a very, very complex kind of conversation. But I think the more that you have that conversation, the more successful your business will be.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. So I'm going to put a few slides up here just for talking points and to give you guys visuals. I don't like to ramble over slides, but I think some of this is going to be helpful. So, and Sean, feel free to jump in whenever you feel like whenever you feel like it.
So you're going to make that offer and all I'm going to do is jump in.
So first, we're going to throw out one definition of brand that I like. I haven't found the definition of brand that I like yet. But here's one from a guy that I have a lot of respect for, Seth Godin. And he says, a brand is the set of expectations, memories, stories, and relationships that taken together account for a consumer's decision to choose one product or service over another. So that's a lot to digest. But basically what he's saying is, when you create brand is much more about emotions, expectations, memories, stories, like the relationships. That's what brand really is, because it will bubble up a feeling in you that you might not even know, you might not be cognizant of, but that's what attracts you to a brand. Is there some deeper connection than just, I like your product, right? So like in the way you can kind of recognize that is, I talk a lot about Apple because I'm an Apple fanboy and I'm not embarrassed about it. So like when Apple comes out with a new product, I'm going to be interested in their product, not just because they make a great phone, but because I'm very interested in how they think about product design. So it's a much deeper connection to Apple than just, I like a phone. Therefore, when they make another phone, I will get another phone from them. But when they make AirPods, I'm going to get those. And when they make an iPad, I might get that. And when they come out with a new MacBook, I might get that, because it's a much deeper connection than just, oh, they make a nice phone, so when they create a new nice phone, I will get that. Yeah. And so just making the point here that brand is when you're trying to create brand, you're creating something much deeper than just a product. And so here's how I think that most people define brand. They think that brand is this. It's a logo, right? And so when you're creating your brand, when you're creating your business and you're thinking about, oh man, I need to do some branding, if you even say that word, you think, oh, I got my logo designed. Maybe you include your company name in that branding and you say, I'm good, right? Got it. Got the logo, got the company name, we're good. Brand is done, okay? Here's what we think brand is. We break it into these 4 pieces where it's brand purpose, brand positioning, brand personality, and brand presence, okay? But here's what we really think brand is, okay? And this is why brand is so complicated. And I'm sure even our definition of brand in this context is not a full definition of brand. But your brand purpose consists of your story, your vision, your mission, your problem, your products, your customer avatars, right? And all of these have every quadrant of this brand definition has all these layers to it, okay? And I don't want to go into all these layers because that can get really complicated, but I do want to talk about a couple of them and why they're important and how they reflect back on that big brand definition. And so if I'm looking at...
I'm going to stop you. I think it's important to remember this in the context of how we define marketing as well. And so we define marketing as like end-to-end marketing. And people traditionally don't think of it that way. We mean like when someone walks into your office space and they see if it's organized, if it's clean, if it's disorganized and there's no one there to greet them, that is marketing. That's creating an experience that's communicating something to your customer. And the reason brand is so much broader than a logo is because your brand should decide what that experience is when your customer, when your client, whoever interacts with your company. That is in the email they receive. That is when they walk into your office space. That's in the paid advertising that they see, of course.
Yeah.
But it's just a broad spectrum. You're really defining how people are going to interact with your company in every sense of the word. And so that's why this brand conversation gets very, very complex.
Yes, that's awesome. And so when we're digging into these complexities of brand, we start in this quadrant with brand purpose. And really you have to define why your company exists, right? Because if you don't know why you exist, two things are going to happen. One, you're not going to have clarity on what problem you're actually trying to solve. So you're not going to have clarity on products. You're not going to have clarity on who you're solving the problem for. The other thing that's really important with why your company exists is if you're starting a business, it's hard. It's difficult. You're going to have days where you're like, I just don't want to do this anymore. But if your why is strong enough, your why is going to get you out of bed and be like, no, because I know there's this group of people that needs to understand this, and I'm the one that's going to help them understand it. And so knowing why your company exists is so important. Your brand story is important. You hear a lot about mission and vision statements, and those get thrown around and they're often very fluffy. Just be real about what your story is and why you're doing what you're doing. If you can get that far, you're ahead of the majority of the people in the world. Next, we move to brand positioning. So it's great that you have a purpose. It's great that you have an idea. It's great that you have a mission and even products and even people that you're going to serve. The question is, what is your uniqueness in the market? What do you bring to the market that's different than your competitor right down the street? If you're a coffee shop and you're opening up across the street from Starbucks, what makes you different? And why would I go and pay you money for coffee instead of paying Starbucks money for coffee, who has done a tremendous job with brand? So what is it about you that makes you unique, that makes me say, I might want to walk in there and try that, right? And this is something that is, again, it's difficult. It's competitor analysis. We use a brand edges exercise that we're not going to dive into right now, but knowing what the keywords are, just like when I think of these words, you want me to think of your brand, right? So really understanding this is where a lot of people fall short with business because they come up with this idea and we all think that our ideas are brilliant, right? The problem is if they're brilliant but not unique, you have to spend a lot of money to let people know that they should buy your product, right? But if you have that uniqueness in your brand, now it's not about the money, it's about getting the messaging out there with passion when you have that uniqueness and you know what your position is in the market.
Well, I think one of the most important conversations that we have, and I think one of the most important things I've learned about brand comes in brand positioning is I think far too many people try to sell better. And so the problem with that is better is relative, right? So what is better for you is not necessarily better for me. Better is very, very hard to define. So if you're a company and all you're trying to do is offer a product or service better than the person you're competing against, it's really, really hard to do that. What is so much easier and quite honestly more effective is selling different. Being very, very clear. Here's the kind of groups of people that my competitors are serving. Here's who I'm serving that's different from my competitors. It's so much easier to say this is different from, X is different from Y and build a company off of that. So brand positioning, when we talk about that, we're always talking about like understanding where you fit in the market that's different and unique from your competitors.
Yes. And it's hard work, right? It's hard work because you really have to sit down and think like, man, I thought that was my position in the market. But if I'm being honest and I look at the other competitors in the market, I'm not unique in that space. So I can still do that thing, but how do I build uniqueness? And if you do that hard work up front, you're going to see the fruits of it when you actually start implementing your business and you see like, wow, people are coming to me because I'm different. Here's the other thing with brand positioning that I think is interesting. There's also people that will not come to you because you're different. And that is absolutely okay. If you have a business where nobody cares either way, and here's a prime example, right? There's a comment that says Starbucks stinks. right? There's people that talk about Apple and they say Apple is horrible. And there's people that talk about Android and say Android is horrible. And that is actually a sign of a good brand, because that means that they evoked emotion, right? If people are completely indifferent, then it means you didn't actually do a good job of creating an emotional stir in someone. So you want, it's so counterintuitive, I know, but you want people to say, I'm never shopping at that store because I don't believe what they believe, right? Like, I think Starbucks stinks. I'm never going there to buy a cup of coffee. For Starbucks, that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
And it's also a good thing for the local coffee shop that can do the same thing, right? The next side of this is brand personality, and brand personality is really, how do you talk, right? Like, we use this My 3 Words exercise where we say, if a year from now, I picked 3 random people on the 3 random customers of yours, or at least people that are aware of your brand, what 3 words do you want them to use to describe you? Okay, because that's your personality. And think of it on an individual level, right? Like, if I'm going to try to structure my life in a way that I want people that when I'm not around, there's 3 words that they use to describe me, that is going to influence the decisions I make, right? If I want people to describe me as patient, then in the moment when I have the decision to make whether I'm going to be patient or not, knowing that I want people to describe me as patient will influence how I react in that moment. The same exact thing is true for brand. When you know how you want people to talk about you when you're not around, you know what words you want them to use to describe you when you're not around, it will influence your decisions. This is coming up now with a lot of this racial tension that we have, and consumers are reaching out to brands and they're saying, what is your stance on this? Okay. And that's a really difficult question. It's a super difficult if you don't know what your brand is. But if you know what your brand personality is, and you say, part of our brand personality is we want to exude empathy. Well, knowing that about your brand will help influence how you respond to those messages, right? If you are the type of brand where you say, we want to get involved in causes that we care about, your response is going to be different than a brand that says, we really try to become very educated on issues and we reserve our opinions, right? That might not be a popular stance, but if that's what your brand personality is, that's okay, right? People don't know their brand personality, and then that's when they get themselves in trouble, because they get these questions like, how do you respond to what's going on in the world? And what happens is the owner responds as the owner, not as the brand, okay? So defining this brand personality really helps you understand how to interact with clients. We see it especially important when you have customers that are upset. I'm going to tell one of my favorite stories about Southwest Airlines. Southwest Airlines got a complaint years ago. And if you've ever flown Southwest, they do these like funny safety talks, right? So they make light of the safety issues, not making light of it, but they try to make it more interesting, right? And so they got this complaint from somebody that's flying Southwest, and they wrote this letter that was basically like, I completely disagree with the way you're doing your safety talks. Safety is a very important issue. It's a very serious issue, and it doesn't seem like you're taking it seriously. And this letter gets sent to Southwest. And everybody that's looking at the letter at Southwest, they don't know what to do with it. So it keeps getting raised up the ladder further and further. And finally, the CEO of Southwest gets the letter. And he thought about it for a while, and he wrote back to that person a 3-word response. And his response was, we'll miss you, right? That is knowing your brand personality, where you say, that person that can't find humor in something that's serious and also understand that we know it's important, that person is not our customer. And we are absolutely going to miss you, but you're probably going to want to fly someone else, right? That's so much clarity on brand positioning. And most small businesses do not have the bravery to do that, to say to a customer, sorry, go shop somewhere else, right? The next, I got to get my thing up here. Okay, the next quadrant is brand presence. And this is really answering the question, how do you visually represent yourself? Now, what we see is businesses start here, right? They say, I'm starting a business. There's 2 things that every business owner does when they start a business. They say, I need a logo. Well, 3 things. I need a name, I need a logo, and I need a business card, right? The thing is, how do you know what your logo should look like if you don't know what your brand story is, if you don't know what your values are, you don't know what your positioning is in the market, you don't know how you want people to think about you and talk about you when you're not around? How do you create a logo? What is your reference point for deciding whether or not that's the right logo? Even your business name. How do you determine whether the business name is right if you don't know what your position is in the market? You don't know how you want people to talk about you. You don't know what your real story is. And so people start here because it's easy, right? Like, I'm not saying creating the logo is easy. I'm saying the idea of saying, go create a logo for me and I can look at it. And if it's pretty, I'm going to say yes. That is easy. But you shouldn't be doing these things like defining your brand colors and your logo and your website and all of those things until you've gone through this entire process of figuring out what your brand is, because those things, knowing all of those other things leading up to your brand presence, that's your filter for determining whether or not your logo and your name and your website are right? Because what is right? What is the right logo? It's the one that represents your brand best. And so we see a lot of people starting here when really, if you create the logo first and then you go through this process, you may find out that's not the right logo because it doesn't convey what you want your brand to convey.
Well, I think a great example of this is Nike. Again, Nike's not as successful a business because they have the swoosh. Like they didn't sit in a boardroom somewhere like, how can we just adjust a check mark real quick in a way that's going to carry our business forward? No. They had an entire brand built, and they just tailored a check mark to represent that brand.
Right.
And so don't get me wrong, like logos are important. They can have a lot of things tied to it, but it's the work that goes in before you kind of get to the logo that really carries a brand.
Yeah. And the logo, we put a lot of emphasis on it, but the reality is, I always tell people, Starbucks is one of the most iconic brands. Draw me the Starbucks logo.
Yeah.
Right? I haven't found anybody yet that can do it. My wife came very close, but it's a really difficult logo, right? Like, you just don't, but you know that it's green and it kind of has wavy hair on it, so it's close enough. But that, like, the brand was built and the logo was just a small piece of that. Yeah. Right? With Nike, the brand was built and the logo was a small piece of that. The logo is not what built the brand. So this is an example of brand, right? This is brand marketing. Just do it, because they're not trying to sell you anything. I don't even know, if I didn't know Nike, I look at this, I have no idea what they do. Like, absolutely no idea what they're trying to sell me. I could probably take some guesses about what they believe. Like, I know they're action oriented, right? I know that they are talking about, like, accomplishing something. On the other hand, this, and I just pick these randomly, so I'm not picking on anyone, but this is an example of a direct marketing ad. On the flip side, I know nothing about this brand. All I know is I can make 3 easy payments at $19.95 and I can get myself a new pillow, right? So neither of these are right or wrong, but you have to know the purpose of them. This ad does not evoke emotion. This does not build a deeper emotional connection with this company. So you need both brand and direct marketing, but you can't do brand marketing if you don't know what your brand is. It's why people default to direct marketing, because it's easier. I can tell you what I sell and how much you have to pay me to get it. That's easy. Brand is very, very, very difficult. And so when you're looking at the purpose of brand marketing versus the purpose of direct marketing, brand, it builds trust, it builds relationship, it builds community. On the other side, direct marketing, again, has its purpose. It sells products. You're a business, not a hobby. So it helps you make money. It can help you build contact lists, but it does not build trust, right? It does not build relationship. It does not build community. So just know what you're using and why you're using it. And so again, this is why we focus so heavily on brand, because brand is really about the trust, the community, the relationship, the emotions that will keep customers coming back over and over and over again, as opposed to, I sell you a product and you go and use the product, right? It's just, there's too many, the marketplaces are too crowded, right? If I just want a cup of coffee and you sell me just a cup of coffee, I'm going to stop at Sheetz, right? It's probably going to be cheaper and I can probably get it faster than going to a local coffee shop. It's just the truth. Give me a reason to come in. So let's see. We have a question from Chrissy. Chrissy asked, how do you do that? I'm assuming you're meaning, I need a little bit of clarification, but are you talking about how do you build brand? How do you actually go about doing it?
I think she may be responding to, so I put in the.
Oh, okay. I gotcha.
Signing up for show notes.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah. So the idea with brand really is here's why no one does it. Let's just be real. It's hard work. It's a lot of work, and there's no way to know whether you're right or wrong. Right? When you define your brand, there's no way to know whether you're right or wrong. It's the same as when you decide what type of human being you want to be. There's no way to tell whether that's right or wrong because it's what's true for you, right? And there's external pressures all the way around, and there's some obvious wrong things, right? Like don't skew what I'm saying. There's some obvious wrong things, both with individuals and with businesses that you shouldn't do. But in the context of whether you should be a upbeat, fun, silly brand, or whether you should be a serious, direct, informative brand, there's no right or wrong. You have to do what's right for you. And this is where the struggle is. You have to know what's right for you. So when a customer complaint comes in and they say, I don't like the way you're doing this, you can say, we'll miss you. If you don't know your brand, you're not going to do that. You're going to change on a whim, and you're going to cater to everybody that comes to you.
So we have a really, really good question. We have a couple of really good questions. So
awesome.
Sarah Kim, who is incredible, asks, how do you gauge the effectiveness of brand besides sales numbers?
Yes. So sales numbers are definitely one way. The other way, a couple other ways you can gauge the effectiveness of a brand is engagement. And so really looking at website, I'll give you one just very direct thing. Website visits that are direct, meaning I typed in your web address and came to your website. That's brand awareness. Because when I do that, I might be looking for a product, but I actually know your brand well enough to know what the web address is and type it directly into my web browser, right? So one of the ways you measure it is direct website traffic. I can give you a whole list of them. You can measure it through surveys, right? So you can create surveys that are more qualitative where you're asking people questions about your brand. And the 3 words exercise. What 3 words would you use to describe this company, right? What 3 words did they write down? Well, if you know that your 3 words are this, and nobody on that survey out of 500 people that you surveyed wrote down any of those 3 words, your brand is not very effective yet. You need to keep working on evoking the right emotions and the right words. And so there's things like that. There are other ways you can tell. So community is an example of brand. So how much is your community interacting with each other without you prodding them along, right? So how much, like when a customer comments on one of your posts or a consumer comments on one of your posts, do other consumers respond, right? That's brand effectiveness. So you have a lot of people in forums when Apple comes up. If somebody writes a negative article about Apple, you'll see a bunch of Apple fans go in and they'll defend the brand for you. That's a sign of brand effectiveness because people are tied in emotionally to that brand. So that's probably something we should put in the resources, Sean, is ways to measure brand effectiveness. I actually have a list of them, but those are a couple ways that you can do it.
Perfect. So another question.
Okay.
Do you feel like your brand can evolve as you grow? I'm curious. I've never actually heard you answer this question, and I'm curious where you fall on it.
Yeah. I think your brand can evolve. I think that the evolution needs to be internal. And so by that, I mean, we have to be very careful about evolution versus swaying with the wind to try to get more sales and make a consumer happy, right? So again, it's much easier to think about brand for me when I equate it to a human being. So am I a different person at 41 than I was at 21? Yes, because I evolved. Now, I didn't evolve to make someone else happy. I evolved because as I learned more about myself and about the world, I'm like, oh, I need to focus more on this thing. Your brand can do the same thing. Brand evolution does not look like I had 2 customer complaints about the way we do our safety talks, so we're not doing them that way anymore. That is not brand evolution. That's lack of brand commitment. And so I think it can evolve, but it has to evolve internally. It can't be influenced by outside sources and swaying with what outside sources tell you should do.
Well, I think there's an element to this. I really, really love the idea of non-negotiables. So when you're defining brand, and we've never really used this language together, I guess, but what is non-negotiable about your brand? So these are the things that are not going to change regardless of circumstance, regardless of, season, whatever you need to say, because what can happen is what basically happened to the YMCA. When the YMCA first started, very, very clear what they were trying to do. If I don't want to go too far into it, but if you look at them now, they're really not the same company. They're not the same organization, and they've evolved basically in a way that's two kind of separate things. Whereas someone like Nike, I think, has done a really nice job of defining this is what's non-negotiable about what we think about athletics and who can be involved in kind of pursuing elite level, sporting, recreational kind of things.
Yep.
The example being is like they kind of went through a transition where they needed to become more friendly towards women involved in like recreational activity. And so that didn't change what they fundamentally believed. They still believed that, sporting and athletic activities were accessible to everyone, but they evolved to do a better job of including more demographics in that message. They didn't change what they believed, but they evolved. And I think that's an important distinction, is you need to define what's non-negotiable that will never change, and these things that can kind of evolve as we understand the market a little bit better.
Yep. Yeah, that's awesome.
So another question, how do you assess quality of brand and
how often do you assess quality of brand?
Yes.
Okay. This is a tricky one. That's a really good question. Yeah. Not too often, because brand moves slow, right? Brand moves much slower than direct marketing. I can come out with a product tomorrow and I can put $50,000 worth of marketing behind just getting people to buy that product, and I can get people to buy that product by the end of the week, right? That's very fast. Emotion moves slow. So I can put out a brand marketing campaign today, but that, unless you just hit an absolute home run, for that brand campaign to work, like the Just Do It Nike campaign, I have to run it for a year, right? I have to run it for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. So I think that you shouldn't be assessing this more often than quarterly, because I just don't think you're actually going to see any movement outside. In a shorter time frame than that. Now, I don't think it doesn't hurt to assess it more often, but it's probably not the best use of time to assess it more often, especially because you have to do things like surveys, which take a lot of work, and you also don't want to put that demand on your clients if you're going to them with a survey every 3 months. And even if a couple people are getting overlap there, one, they're going to remember their answers that they put last time. And so they might not answer truly because they're influenced from their previous answer, but also you're going to start to bog down. You're asking, right? When you're asking for feedback on your brand, you're not necessarily building brand trust. So you also don't want to weigh them down. So I would say no more often than quarterly would you assess the quality of the brand and effectiveness.
Well, I think there are certain things that should trigger kind of an evaluation of the brand. So like if you launch kind of like a sub brand, or if you introduce a very significantly new kind of product line that's maybe not quite what just big changes like that, you should probably do some brand evaluation after the fact to see how the market has kind of changed their perception of your brand at that point. But yeah, definitely you don't want to over evaluate, because I feel like that can be, over analysis at some point.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is there's both the evolution of your brand, and you hit on it, Sean, but there's also change in brand perception.
Yes.
Right. So as perception of your brand changes, then that can affect your brand effectiveness. You see this all the time with big companies. A CEO does something dumb, or a CEO is accused of doing something dumb, and brand perception changes dramatically overnight. Right. And so and then on the other side, you have Nike that when this racial tension started boiling over again, They came out with a campaign that is don't do it. Right. And so that's true to their brand. They're known for putting their beliefs out into the world, but their brand perception will for sure be changed because of how they did that. Some people will like it, some people will not. And so if you do something like that and you really want to know how your brand perception changed, you can evaluate the brand again after that.
Yeah.
So guys, I think that I hope that this gives you a little better sense of brand. I do not expect anyone that, after we gave this overview that you're going to, jump off of this video and you're going to go and you're going to fully define your brand. It's a process. It takes time. It's hard work because you actually have to sit down and clear your mind and think about it and come up with 17 wrong answers before you get to one that feels right. So yeah, there's a lot of work to do here. This is just kind of a starting place to start thinking about brand and how we're thinking about it, and how you really dig deeper into it.
Another question. Yeah. Okay. You want to take it?
Sure.
Besides on-the-spot testing, you evaluate employees to enforce brand identity?
That is a fantastic question. And I'm glad you're thinking about this because a lot of business owners think like they become the brand and they're like, well, I'm the brand. But your employees are a significant part of your brand because they are reflecting that every day, right? Hopefully. Yeah. And so how do you measure it? I think part of it is making sure they understand the brand. Because if you want to enforce their ability to represent your brand, you have to make sure they truly, fully understand the brand. Could your employees tell me your brand story and get it right? Yeah. Can your employees tell me what your 3 words are and get it right? Can your employees recite the mission statement? Can they recite the vision statement? Right? Did they know where you're positioned in the market versus your competitors? And when they're talking to clients, are they thinking like, oh, they told me they shop at this place. I know how we set ourselves apart from Target. And so they can interject that into a conversation, right? Do you have email templates that you've given them where this is the way we talk to clients? For example, we have a very casual tone. So when we interact with clients, like if I was sending Sarah an email, it is not, hello there, hello kind ma'am, right? It is, hey, Sarah, how's it going, right? And so you have to make sure that your employees truly, fully understand the brand, because evaluating them on something that they don't fully understand is not fair to them. Now, if they fully understand it, how do you enforce it? It's really hard, right? It's really hard. And I don't claim to be an expert in this specific area by any means. But enforcing it is a lot of spot testing. So you asked outside of spot testing, how do you do it? Another way that I know of that I've seen people use is asking your customers about their interactions with your employees, right? And asking the ones you can trust. A lot of times this works better if you do it anonymously. Like, I don't want the employee's name. I just want to know how, first of all, the customer. I'm not a huge fan of anonymous feedback generally, so I wouldn't ask the customer to be anonymous. I want to know who that is because people are more honest when you know who they are, I believe. But don't make them tell you the name of the employee. But generally, how do my employees act? How would you describe your interaction with my employees? Do you think they understand what we're trying to do? So again, surveys, getting feedback from people that are interacting with them outside of you, because we know that like a lot of employees, right, Sean, might interact differently with customers than they interact with their boss.
I would argue that sometimes employees act better. No, I'm totally kidding.
So yeah, there's that. But I think getting that feedback from all areas, both you observing them, getting feedback from customers that are interacting with them. But I think the really, really, really important thing is to make sure that they fully understand the brand. Again, they can't fully understand the brand if you've not fully defined the brand for them.
Well, and I think so. One element to this that far too many people, again, I'm in my limited experience, but any place I've worked, more important to brand is the things that you allow. And so if you're allowing your employees to talk a certain way, interact with customers a certain way, like even internally in meetings, if they kind of undermine their coworkers. Those things that you allow are just as significant to people's understanding of your brand. And so I think so critical to evaluating your employees is look at what you're allowing them to do that isn't necessarily defined, because that speaks just as much to your brand. So the more you can become aware of the things that you're allowing to happen within your company, both internally and how they interact with customers, is critically important. And start to not allow certain things because it speaks negatively to your brand.
Right. And the question is, what are those things that you allow and you don't allow? Your brand is your filter, right? If I say we absolutely value customers first, and then I tell my employees, yeah, you can be on your cell phone when and when customers are in the store, as long as when they come up and talk to you, you put your phone away. That does not, those are opposites, right? Because I don't feel important when I walk into a store and somebody peeks up over their phone to say hi and then looks back at their phone. That does not value the customer. So it's those things where when you truly know what your brand is, it becomes obvious what the things that you should and shouldn't allow are.
Yeah, that's good.
So guys, again, I hope this gets you started at least thinking about brand. If you have more questions, feel free to reach out. We'll give you our opinion on it from the show. I'm sure you know we have lots of opinions. But I really, truly think that brand is going to be the game changer for all businesses. And if small businesses don't figure this out, we're going to continually put down big brands and not understand why we can't compete with them, when the reality is they're just better at branding than us, right? Like big businesses are just better at branding than small businesses are. And so we can't complain about it if we have the knowledge and we just don't go do it. If they're better, they're going to win. And so the only thing we can do is we have to get better at it as well. So I hope you guys think about this a little bit more. I hope you dig into it. And again, I hope if you have questions, you'll reach out to us. So guys, thanks for hanging out with us for the last 40 minutes here. We're going to get out of your way so you can enjoy the rest of your day. Sign up for the show notes, ghostcreative.com/live, and we will see you on Friday at 9 a.m. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.